In December 2025, someone tried to collect their silver. 60% of America's deliverable silver stockpile was claimed in 4 days. 60% in 4 days. The exchange's response? They offered $65 million in bribes to not take delivery. 95% of those claims were settled in cash. Not because the traders wanted cash, because the silver wasn't there. Welcome to the museum economy. In the West, we've built a grand financial museum filled with beautiful paper artifacts, futures contracts, ETF shares, complex derivatives. We gaze at them through glass cases, admiring their sophistication. Meanwhile, the East is quietly loading the actual treasure onto trucks and driving away. In the next 20 minutes, I'll show you 3 things that will change how you see every silver price on every screen. First, why the United States government sold every last ounce of its strategic silver reserves, and what they sold it for is going to make you want to throw something at your screen. Second, how an economic boa constrictor is slowly strangling the global silver supply. Not attacking, not rushing, just squeezing, tighter with every breath. And third, why the price you see quoted on CNBC might be the most elaborate illusion in modern finance. But to understand the bribe, we need to understand 2 completely different worlds, 2 markets, 2 realities, and only one of them is telling the truth. Let's start with the price you know, the one on CNBC, the one in your trading app, the one that says silver is $32 an ounce. This price comes from COMEX in New York and the LBMA in London, the biggest futures exchanges in the world. And here's what they don't tell you about how this price is set. For every single ounce of physical silver sitting in those vaults, there are between 250 and 400 paper claims, futures contracts, options, derivatives, all of them promising the same ounce of metal. Let me put that in terms you can visualize. Imagine a bank with 1,000 safe deposit boxes, solid, real, physical boxes you can touch. Now imagine that bank has issued 400,000 keys. 400,000 keys, 1,000 boxes. Each key holder genuinely believes their key opens their box. They're paying storage fees. They have the paperwork. They get statements. Everything looks legitimate. The system works perfectly, as long as no more than 0.25% of them ever show up on the same day. That's the silver market right now. That's what 250 to 400 paper claims per ounce actually means. Musical chairs with 400 players and 1 chair. And the music is slowing down. Only 0.04% of COMEX contracts, that's 1 in 2,500, ever result in actual physical delivery. The rest are what they call cash settled, which is a polite way of saying they pay you dollars instead of silver. Not because you wanted dollars, because they don't have your silver. So here's the first thing to understand. The spot price isn't the price of silver. It's the price of a promise of silver. And as we're about to see, promises can be broken. Now let's look at the other market, the one most Western investors have never heard of, the Shanghai Gold Exchange. In Shanghai, physical delivery isn't the exception, it's the norm. You buy silver, you take silver. No paper games, no 400 to 1 leverage, just metal changing hands. And here's where it gets interesting. Right now, silver on the Shanghai Exchange is trading at $101 an ounce. The Western paper price is $32. Same metal, same day. An 11% premium just to get physical silver in the East. But that's not even the scary part. The market has entered something called backwardation. And if you're not a commodities trader, let me explain why that matters. Here's how normal commodity markets work. If you're buying silver for delivery next month, you pay a little more than today's price. Why? Storage costs, financing, the convenience of locking in a price now. This premium for future delivery is called contango, normal, expected, how markets are supposed to work. Backwardation is the opposite, and it's a giant red flag. When the spot price, what you pay for silver right now, is higher than the futures price, something is very wrong. It means buyers are so desperate for physical metal today that they'll pay more for immediate delivery than for delivery next month. Think about that. In a normal world, waiting should cost you money. In backwardation, waiting saves you money, but nobody wants to wait. In commodity markets, backwardation is the fire alarm, not the smoke detector beeping because you burned toast, the fire alarm that means the building is actually on fire. The silver market has been in backwardation for months. The alarm has been ringing, and almost nobody in the West is listening. So we have two markets telling two completely different stories. The paper museum says everything's fine. Business as usual. $32. Nothing to see here. The physical market says someone's lying. Premiums are blowing out. Backwardation is screaming. And people are paying 70% more just to get actual metal in their hands. The question is, which market is telling the truth? The answer is playing out right now, in three simultaneous squeezes that most Western investors can't even see happening. Let me introduce you to the economic boa constrictor. The boa constrictor doesn't attack like a cobra. It doesn't strike fast and inject venom. It wraps itself around its prey, and with every exhale, it tightens. Just a little. Just enough that the next breath is harder than the last. That's China's silver strategy. Here's what most people don't realize. China imports 89% of the world's silver ore, not refined silver, the raw ore. They bring it into the country, process it in their own refineries, and then they keep most of it. China consumes 5 times more silver than it produces. 5 times. And they've just made a move that should have been front-page news everywhere, but somehow wasn't. On January 1, 2026, China implemented a new export licensing system for refined silver. Every shipment now requires government approval. Only companies processing more than 80 tons annually can even apply for a license. Do the math. This effectively ring-fenced 65% of the world's refined silver supply behind Chinese export controls. But here's what makes this a boa constrictor move and not an attack. They didn't ban exports. They didn't seize foreign assets. They just added friction, paperwork, delays, uncertainty. Each restriction is small enough to be ignored, but together, the coils are tightening. And here's the irony that history forgot. In the 1930s, American silver policy destroyed China's economy, crashed their currency, forced them off the silver standard. What goes around? But we'll get to that revenge story. First, let me show you the second coil. If China is the boa constrictor, India is the bottomless pit. India is now the world's largest importer of refined silver. In 2024, they imported $9.2 billion worth. That's a 44% increase from the year before. But October 2024 broke every record in the book. In a single month, India imported 60 million ounces of silver. That's a 300% increase from the same month the year before. They weren't shipping it by boat anymore, they were flying it in by plane. Cargo planes full of silver bars landing in Mumbai because sea freight wasn't fast enough. Now here's what Western economists can't wrap their heads around. Normally, when prices rise, demand falls. Basic economics, right? Supply and demand curves and all that. In India, the opposite happens. The higher the price goes, the more Indians buy. They call it buying the rip. And it's not irrational, it's cultural. In India, silver isn't a speculation, it's generational wealth, wedding dowries, religious tradition. When prices rise, it confirms they made the right choice. Their parents made the right choice. Their grandparents made the right choice. So they buy more. The demand got so extreme that the Indian government slashed import duties from 15% to 6%. Not to stimulate demand. Demand was already through the roof. They cut duties to stop smuggling. When your black market is booming because legal supply can't keep up, you've got a problem no policy can solve. That's the second coil. Now let me show you the trap. Here's something most people don't know about silver. It has the highest electrical conductivity of any element, the highest thermal conductivity of any element. There is no substitute for what silver does in electronics. And the green energy revolution runs on silver. Every solar panel uses about 20 grams of silver. Doesn't sound like much until you realize the world is installing hundreds of millions of these panels every year. Total solar demand, 232 million ounces in 2024 alone. But here's the trap. The newer, more efficient panels, TOPCon, SHJ technology, they use 50 to 100% more silver per panel. The better the technology gets, the more silver it needs. Electric vehicles use 25 to 50 grams of silver each. Traditional cars use 15 to 28 grams. Every EV on the road is pulling more silver out of the supply chain. AI data centers, 5G infrastructure. Every piece of advanced technology is silver hungry. And here's the problem nobody wants to talk about. You can't just mine more silver. Here's the supply trap nobody talks about. If gold prices double, gold miners dig faster. Simple economics, more profit, more production. Silver doesn't work that way. 72 to 75% of all silver comes out of the ground as a byproduct. It's the consolation prize when you're mining for copper, or lead, or zinc. The miner doesn't care about silver. It's just what happens to come up with the copper they actually wanted. So if silver prices double, what happens? Nothing. The copper miner doesn't care. They're going to mine exactly as much copper as they were going to mine anyway. Silver production stays flat. You can't just mine more silver. You'd have to convince copper companies to double their production just so you could get more of their waste product. Good luck with that. And even if you discovered a new silver deposit tomorrow, a massive, pure silver vein, it takes 7 to 15 years to build a mine. Permits, environmental reviews, infrastructure, financing. The green energy transition needed that silver 5 years ago. The supply response isn't coming in time. It's mathematically impossible. This is the 5th consecutive year of structural silver deficit. The cumulative gap from 2021 to 2025 is over 800 million ounces. That's 10 months of global mine production that was consumed and never replaced.
And here's the part that makes this different from gold. Gold sits in vaults, forever. The gold the Egyptians mined is still around. You can melt it, reshape it, but it's still there. Silver gets consumed. Industrial silver is dissipated, spread so thin it can never be economically recovered. 60% of the silver that goes into a solar panel? Gone. Not stored, not waiting to be recycled, atomically dispersed, vanished. Every solar panel, every circuit board, every medical device, using up silver that will never come back. China squeezing exports, India buying everything in sight, green tech consuming irreplaceable supply, 5 years of deficits, and a paper market pretending none of this matters. This sounds theoretical, like projections and forecasts and maybe someday scenarios. Let me show you it's happened before, multiple times, and what happened next should terrify every paper silver holder. Before we get to modern market crashes, let's understand how we got here, how America ended up with a strategic silver stockpile in the first place. And for that, we need to go back to the Great Depression. 1934. Franklin Roosevelt signs the Silver Purchase Act. The Treasury is ordered to buy silver until it reaches 1/4 the value of the nation's gold reserves. Massive government buying program. Why? Was there an economic crisis requiring silver intervention? No. Politics. Pure politics. 7 Western states had powerful mining interests. Those senators wanted higher silver prices. FDR needed their votes. So America started buying silver, lots of it. The effect was devastating, just not for America. China was on the silver standard. Their currency was backed by silver. When America started hoovering up global silver supplies, China's money started flowing out of the country. By November 1935, China was forced off the silver standard entirely. Their economy was wrecked. And it wasn't an accident of policy, it was a direct and predictable consequence that Washington simply didn't care about. American domestic politics
destroyed another nation's monetary system. And this buying program created the very strategic stockpile that the United States would later sell off for commemorative coins. We'll get to that. But first, the symmetry. Now, 90 years later, China is slowly returning the favor. That's how we got the stockpile. Now let me show you what happens when someone tries to break the paper game.
Fast forward to 1979. Two Texas billionaires named Nelson and William Herbert Hunt decided to do something nobody had tried at scale before. They decided to call the paper markets Bluff. The Hunts didn't just buy silver futures, they took delivery. Physical bars, actual metal. They accumulated over 100 million ounces, roughly 1/3 of all the tradable silver in the world. The price went vertical. January 1979, $6 an ounce. January 1980, $49.45, an 8x increase in 12 months. And the Hunts weren't stopping. They wanted more physical silver. Every delivery notice they filed was another crack in the paper market's facade. Because for every contract they settled in metal, someone had to actually find that metal and deliver it. The exchanges started to panic. January 21, 1980. COMEX enacted Silver Rule 7, later called liquidation-only trading. From that moment forward, traders could only sell silver contracts, not buy them. Think about that, a one-way market, by exchange decree. Combined with the Federal Reserve jacking interest rates to 20%, the Hunts were suddenly fighting gravity. The price collapsed. March 27, 1980, Silver Thursday. The price crashed 50% in a single day. The Hunts missed a $100 million margin call. $7 billion in paper profits became $1.7 billion in debt. And here's the darkest part. The banks had to bail out the Hunts. Not to save the brothers, to save themselves. The major banks had so much exposure to Hunt silver positions that if the Hunts defaulted, the banks would fall too. Bunker Hunt later said something that every paper silver holder should tattoo on their forearm. Just about anything you buy, rather than paper, is better. If you don't like gold, use silver, or diamonds, or copper, but something. Any damn fool can run a printing press. The lesson? When physical delivery threatened the paper system, the rules changed overnight. The shorts who couldn't deliver were protected. The longs who demanded delivery were destroyed. Think that was ancient history? Let's talk about 2022. The London Metal Exchange, one of the oldest, most respected commodity exchanges in the world. And in March 2022, they did something that proved the paper market playbook hasn't changed in 40 years. Nickel prices were spiking. A short squeeze was underway. Prices doubled to $100,000 per ton. Traders who had bet on lower prices were getting obliterated. What did the LME do? They didn't just halt trading, they cancelled trades. Billions of dollars in executed, confirmed trades, erased, retroactively, with a keystroke. If you had a winning trade on the books, if you had done everything right, if you had outsmarted the market, too bad. The exchange decided your trade never happened. And here's the kicker. When traders finally did take delivery of nickel from LME warehouses, some of those bags were later found to contain stone, not nickel, rock. In 2022, a major commodity exchange proved two things. Your paper contract is worth exactly what they say it's worth, and they can change their mind retroactively. 1934, 1980, 2022. 3 times the paper system broke. 3 times the rules changed. 3 times the people holding paper lost. So that's history. Now let me show you what happened last month and answer the question you clicked for. Remember that December 2025 crisis I mentioned at the start? Let me give you the full picture now that you understand the stakes. December 1st through 4th, 2025. 4 days. 12,946 contracts filed for physical delivery on COMEX. That's 65 million ounces of silver that traders said, "I don't want your cash settlement, I want my metal." The vaults held 113 million ounces total. In 4 days, traders claimed more than half of everything they had.
The exchange's response was pure panic. They jacked margin requirements from 4% to 30%. Overnight, they offered cash premiums, $65 million in total, to anyone willing to not take delivery. Here's extra money. Please don't ask for your silver. And it worked. 95% of those delivery requests were settled in cash. Not because the traders changed their minds about wanting silver, but because the premiums were too rich to refuse, and everyone knew what would happen if they pushed harder. The metal wasn't there. Everyone knew the metal wasn't there. And the only thing preventing a full-blown delivery failure was a massive bribe and the implicit threat that the rules could change overnight, just like 1980. Do the math. 12,946 contracts almost drained 113 million ounces in 4 days. What happens when the next wave comes? Which brings us to the question you clicked for.
The strategic silver stockpile. Created in June 1968, 165 million troy ounces of silver stored at West Point and San Francisco. A national reserve of one of the most industrially critical metals on the planet. By 1979, a government report concluded the stockpile was unnecessary. By 2002, it was completely gone. Where did 165 million ounces of strategic silver go? They sold it to the United States Mint for American Silver Eagle commemorative coins, for collectors, for souvenirs. Let that sink in. We had 165 million ounces of one of the most industrially critical metals on the planet. The stuff that makes solar panels work, the stuff inside every smartphone, every electric vehicle, every piece of advanced technology. And we turned it into collectibles, for hobbyists, for display cases, for the gift shop at the end of the museum tour. While China was building refinery capacity to process 89% of global silver ore, we were minting pretty coins. While China was implementing export controls to ring-fence strategic supply, we were selling to collectors and tourists. While the East was loading actual treasure onto trucks, we were adding more artifacts to the display cases. The draining of America's silver reserves wasn't a conspiracy. It was something worse. It was indifference. The museum economy doesn't hoard real assets. It hoards paper. It collects artifacts. It admires sophistication. And then, one day, it looks up and realizes the real treasure is gone. The museum economy in one statistic, the United States of America, the country that won the space race, built the internet, and maintains 800 military bases worldwide, currently holds exactly 0 ounces of strategic silver reserves. 0. And China? They stopped publishing that number years ago, which tells you everything you need to know about who understands what's coming. Silver isn't the whole story. It's a symptom of something larger. A global reordering where paper promises are being systematically exchanged for physical reality. Central banks have been net buyers of gold for 15 consecutive years. Not selling, buying. Every year for a decade and a half. 2022 through 2024, they purchased 3,220 tons. That's the highest 3-year accumulation since 1967. Russia's gold reserves now represent 42% of their total reserves, the highest percentage since 1995. They're not betting on the dollar. The dollar's share of global reserves has fallen from 72% in 2002 to 58% in 2024. A 14-point drop while everyone was watching the stock market. And then there's BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus a growing list of new members. They're developing a new trade settlement currency. The working name is the unit. The prototype is 40% backed by gold. 40%. The East isn't just buying silver. They're systematically converting paper promises into physical reality.
museum artifacts into actual treasure. Silver is just the canary in the coal mine. It's small enough to squeeze, critical enough to matter, and overlooked enough that most Western investors won't notice until it's too late.
So what happens next? The boa constrictor doesn't kill quickly. It waits, it tightens, and with each breath, the space to breathe gets smaller. Look at the coils, China's export controls. A little tighter. India's insatiable demand. Another coil. The green tech supply trap. Tighter still. 5 consecutive years of structural deficits. COMEX inventories down 70% from their peak. Shanghai premiums widening to 11% over Western prices. Every data point is another coil. Every month, the supply gets tighter. Every year, the deficit compounds. And the paper market? Still pretending $32 is the real price. Still issuing 400 keys for every box. Still running the same game they've run since 1934. The difference is, the prey is starting to notice it can't breathe. December 2025 was the first gasp. 95% settled in cash because the metal wasn't there. What happens when it's 80%, 50%? What happens when someone with deep enough pockets says, "I don't want your cash, I want my silver"? The music is slowing down, and there are still 400 players circling one chair. When the paper market finally disconnects from physical reality, and history says it will, one of two things happens. Scenario 1, the price explodes. The paper price suddenly has to catch up to physical reality, like gold after Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. Gold went from $35 to $850 over the next decade, a 24x increase. If silver's paper price had to reflect actual physical scarcity, you can do that math yourself. Scenario 2, the rules change. Like 1980, like 2022, the exchanges step in. Liquidation only, trades cancelled, cash settlements forced. The shorts who couldn't deliver are protected. The longs who demanded delivery are destroyed. Either the price explodes or the paper becomes worthless. Those are the only two outcomes when leverage meets reality. The pattern is clear. 1934, 1980, 2022. The only question is which scenario and when. Yes, they might change the rules again. They probably will. But changing rules doesn't create silver. It just determines who gets left holding worthless paper when the music stops. So what do you do with this information?
I'm not here to give you investment advice. I'm not going to tell you to buy silver or sell your ETF or move to Singapore. That's not what this channel is about. I'm here to give you a framework, a lens, a way of seeing that most people don't have. The next time you see a silver price on a screen, ask yourself one question. Is this the price of the artifact or the price of the treasure? Is this the paper promise or the physical reality? Because in the museum economy, the curators are still admiring the display cases, they're still issuing keys, they're still collecting fees, they're still running the same game they've always run. They haven't noticed yet that the vaults are empty, but you have. Let's recap what you now understand that most investors don't. The spot price is the price of a promise, not the price of metal. 400 paper claims for every ounce of physical silver. China is running a boa constrictor strategy, slow, patient, lethal. India is buying the rip regardless of price. Green tech is consuming silver that can never be recovered. America sold its entire strategic reserve for commemorative coins. Not conspiracy, indifference. And when paper markets break, 1934, 1980, 2022, they break the same way every time. The rules change. The paper holders lose. If you found this valuable, here's what I want you to do. First, drop your prediction in the comments. Price explosion or rule change? Which scenario do you think hits first? I read every comment and I genuinely want to know what you're thinking. Second, if you want to stay ahead of the next economic earthquake before it hits the headlines, subscribe and hit the bell. I put out deep dives like this every week, topics that Wall Street doesn't want you thinking about. The museum economy is running out of treasure. The question is whether you see it coming. I'm Economy Unpacked. I'll see you in the next one.